I work a standard office job 5 days a week, and one of my favorite things to do is cook. Almost every night, I make dinner for myself, so I stop by the store for fresh ingredients about every other day. There's a Walmart just a mile from my apartment, and since they usually have the best prices, it's my go-to spot for groceries. A few months ago, I was doing my usual after-work shopping. I never bought much, just 4 or 5 ingredients, sometimes a few extras. I typically arrived around 3 or 4 p.m., and the store was always somewhat busy. One day, while picking out produce, an employee greeted me. I didn't think much of it at first, but the next time I was there, he said hello again. I hadn't really noticed him before, but I never paid much attention to the employees. He was a big guy, bald, with a short dark beard, and seemed friendly. That second time, he asked how my day was going. We exchanged a few polite words before I moved on with my shopping. Over the next couple of weeks, this became a pattern. Every time I went to Walmart, he would greet me and strike up a conversation. At first, I didn't mind. He was always polite, but I was usually in a hurry to get home and didn't want to chat. Then, he started asking more personal questions. Was I coming from work? Where did I work? Where did I live? It started to make me uncomfortable, but I told myself he was just being friendly. One evening, as I was shopping, he approached me again. After the usual small talk, he asked for my number. I politely declined, not wanting to give him the wrong idea. Besides, it felt odd. He barely seemed to do any actual work, and always seemed to be hanging around. His whole demeanor changed when I said no. He looked offended, and as I tried to explain, he turned and walked away without another word. I finished shopping and checked out about 10 minutes later. When I got to my car, I noticed him sitting inside a vehicle not far from mine. He didn't appear to be looking at me, which was a relief. I pulled out of my spot, and so did he. As I exited the parking lot, I kept an eye on my rearview mirror. He made the same 2 turns I did. By the time I reached my apartment complex, I was almost certain he didn't live there. Instead of driving straight to my building, I circled the lot. His car followed mine the entire time. That's when I knew I couldn't go home. I had no idea where I was heading, but I had to get away. I drove to a busier road, trying to lose him. Traffic was heavy since it was rush hour. When I saw a small gap, I waited until the last possible second and merged in, cutting it close. The car behind me honked, but it worked. He had no chance to follow. Relieved, I suddenly had an idea. Furious, I drove straight back to Walmart and went to the customer service desk. I told them that one of their employees had followed me home. The store wasn't very organized, so they called someone from the produce section to check. When I described the man, they told me no one matching that description worked there. That's when it hit me. He wasn't an employee. He must have been wearing a Walmart vest, but he didn't actually work there. Maybe he had worked at a Walmart before, or maybe he just bought the vest online. Either way, it was terrifying. The store employees promised to keep an eye out for him, but that didn't do much to ease my fear. I carefully drove home, watching for his car. Thankfully, I didn't see him again. I don't think he ever figured out which apartment was mine. That was months ago, and I haven't been back to that Walmart since. I also haven't seen him again, but the thought of what could have happened still chills me. Last year, I was shopping at my local Walmart on a random weeknight. The store was quiet, and it was around 8 or 9 in the evening. I had been browsing for about 15 minutes when I found myself in the fitness aisle, looking at a massage gun. I wasn't planning on buying one that day, but I was considering getting one in the future. As I stood there reading the box, I overheard voices from the next aisle over, which happened to be the toy section near the back corner of the store. I heard a man's voice followed by a child's. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but then I heard the man say, "I'll buy you this toy if you come with me." At first, I assumed he was the child's father, but something about the way he said it felt off. I couldn't make out the child's response, but then the man added, "Your mom said it's okay." That's when a terrible feeling hit me. What if this wasn't her father? The man kept saying, "Come on, let's go," and I could hear them moving toward the end of the aisle. I hesitated, unsure if I was overreacting, but something in my gut told me I needed to check. I walked out of my aisle and glanced down the toy aisle, where I saw a man in a black jacket and winter hat holding a little girl's hand, leading her away. Thinking quickly, I called out, "Excuse me." The man turned, looking startled. I grabbed a random stuffed animal from the shelf and walked toward them, pretending to need advice. "Hey, do you think this would be a good gift for my niece?" I asked. The man looked uncomfortable and replied that he had no idea. I pressed further. "Oh, I thought you might know. Is this your daughter?" He hesitated before answering. "No, I'm just watching her for a moment." Then he quickly added, "We really need to get going." Without another word, he and the girl walked away. I stood there, debating if I was overthinking the situation. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. But just as I convinced myself I was being paranoid, I heard a woman's voice nearby, calling out a name. Let's say it was Sarah. Her tone was concerned, but not quite panicked. I walked over to her and asked, "Is Sarah your daughter?" She immediately looked worried and said yes. A terrible feeling hit me. "I think I just saw her with a man," I told her. "They might be heading toward the exit." Without hesitation, we sprinted to the front of the store. Thankfully, it had only been about a minute since I had seen them. When we reached the self-checkout area, there they were, the man and the little girl. He was buying her a toy. The girl's mother yelled her name, and the man immediately tried to cover himself, claiming he was just being nice. But as soon as he realized no one would believe him, he bolted out the door. Security was alerted, and the most important thing was that Sarah was safe. Her mother explained that she had wandered off while she was shopping, thinking her daughter was still nearby. Fortunately, the man was caught not long after. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if I hadn't stopped to ask a simple question. I remember a Walmart near where I live that used to be open 24 hours. I think a lot of Walmarts used to be open all night, but in recent years, the ones I've been to now close around 10 p.m. Maybe incidents like the one I experienced are part of the reason why. This happened several years ago, around 2014. At the time, I had a job with unpredictable hours, and I never really knew when I'd get off work. Some nights, it was really late. One night, I finished work close to 3 a.m. I was exhausted, but also starving, so I decided to stop at the 24-hour Walmart on my way home, since no nearby restaurants were open. My plan was just to grab a quick snack and a drink. When I walked into the store, it was nearly empty. I only saw a couple of employees here and there. I headed straight for the snack aisle and browsed around for a few minutes, struggling to decide what I wanted. Then I got this strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked around and noticed a man standing at the far end of the aisle, staring directly at me. He was tall and skinny, wearing a black Adidas sweatshirt. When he saw me looking at him, he didn't look away. He wasn't even pretending to browse the shelves. Something about him felt off. I turned my attention back to the snacks and then walked into the next aisle over. Almost immediately, I noticed him creeping around the corner, peeking at me again. That was when I knew something was definitely wrong. I grabbed a bag of trail mix and tried to shake him by heading towards the back of the store, walking along the side aisles. But when I reached one of the main walkways, he was already standing there, watching me. I started moving around the store, changing directions multiple times, and he followed me every step of the way. He never spoke or showed any expression. He just kept trailing me, silently. The whole thing was beyond unsettling. Finally, I'd had enough. I went straight to the checkout and told the cashier that some guy had been following me. The man didn't come into the checkout area but wandered off toward the clothing section nearby. The cashier just nodded and said, "Thanks for letting us know," agreeing that it was weird. I quickly paid for my things and made my way toward the exit, scanning the store one last time to make sure he wasn't still following me. When I didn't see him, I felt a wave of relief. As I stepped into the parking lot and walked to my car, I noticed that most of the lot was empty except for a few scattered cars, probably belonging to employees. My car wasn't parked too far, but it wasn't that close either. Just as I started my engine, I looked up and saw something that made my stomach drop. The same man was sprinting at full speed from the Walmart, headed straight for my car. He was running like his life depended on it, but he wasn't running away from something. He was running toward me. For a second, I just froze, watching in shock. Then it hit me. He was going to reach my car in seconds. I slammed the car into drive and sped out of there, barely pulling away before he could get to me. Even as I exited the parking lot and got onto the street, I saw him still running after me until I was completely out of sight. I have no idea who he was, why he followed me around the store, or what he planned to do if he caught up to me. But after that night, I made one thing certain: I would never go to Walmart in the middle of the night again. I'm a female, and this story took place about 4 years ago. I was shopping at Walmart, a place I used to visit frequently. That night, I was only picking up a couple of items, so I wasn't planning to stay long. The store was somewhat busy, but I quickly found what I needed and spent no more than 10 minutes inside. As I was browsing, a man appeared out of nowhere and introduced himself. He was about 5 feet 8 inches with grayish hair. He asked for my name and what I was shopping for. It was clear he didn't work there, and something about him felt off. I exchanged a few words with him, but made an excuse to leave because he was creeping me out. I headed straight for the self-checkout area, which only had 2 other shoppers. As I scanned my items, I noticed the man again. He had followed me from the aisle we were in, on the complete opposite side of the store. Instead of using an open register, he walked straight up to me and offered to pay for my items. I politely declined and asked why he wanted to do that. He simply said he was trying to be nice. I thanked him, but insisted I could pay for myself. Without another word, he walked away, without purchasing anything, and left the store. After checking out, I stepped outside, only to see the man standing there. He greeted me again, which startled me, but I replied with a hesitant "hi." Then he asked if I wanted to come over to his house. The situation was beyond awkward. I firmly declined and started walking away. At first, he took a few steps alongside me, but after a few seconds, he stopped. Thankfully, he didn't follow me any further, and I made it to my car and drove home. The experience was unsettling, but I brushed it off. Sure, the guy was a little creepy, but I didn't think it was a big deal. I continued shopping at that Walmart regularly, and for about a month, I had no issues. Then, one evening around 8 p.m., I was back at the store doing some grocery shopping when I saw him again. At first, I didn't immediately recognize him, but within seconds, the memory of our previous encounter came rushing back. I knew I had to get out of there. I quickly walked away, trying to put as much distance as possible between us. I moved to the opposite end of the store, avoiding the grocery section until I was sure he was gone. To kill time, I wandered through some random aisles where there were fewer shoppers. Then I spotted him again, this time heading in my direction from a distance. My heart started racing. I knew I couldn't let him reach me. I hurried down different aisles, trying to stay out of sight. Realizing I wouldn't be able to check out without risking another encounter, I left my basket on the ground and walked straight out of the store. Once I got to my car, I drove home immediately. After that night, I avoided that Walmart for a long time. Maybe it was just a coincidence that I ran into him again, but the way he seemed intent on approaching me made me certain he would have tried to start another conversation. I can only assume he shops there often, but thankfully, I haven't seen him since. I used to work at Walmart a couple of years ago, and this was by far my strangest experience. I mostly worked overnight shifts, stocking shelves. It was an easy job for me. My shift started around 9 p.m., and for the first couple of hours, the store was still open before closing at 11 p.m. There were never many customers during that time anyway. Since Walmart is such a big store, a good number of us worked overnight to keep things running smoothly. One night, I was assigned to stock the pet supplies aisle, which was in the back of the store. I had been working in that general area earlier, but by now it was about 11:30 p.m., half an hour after the store had closed. As usual, I had my headphones in, listening to music while I worked. It helped pass the time. Out of nowhere, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It looked like someone had just walked by. I glanced over, but whoever it was had already disappeared. Assuming it was one of my coworkers, I didn't think much of it and kept working. A few minutes later, I saw someone again at the end of the aisle. This time, when I looked up, they didn't walk away. It wasn't one of my coworkers. It was a man I had never seen before. The moment our eyes met, he quickly disappeared behind the next aisle. Feeling uneasy, I got up and walked over to check. I peered down the next aisle just in time to see the man slip into the one after that. Something wasn't right. I took out my headphones and immediately radioed on my walkie-talkie, letting the team know that I thought someone was still inside the store who shouldn't be there. After that, I tried to shake it off and continued working. About an hour later, I went to the back storage area. That part of the store was pretty big, but at the time, I was the only one there. As I walked through, I saw him again. He was hiding behind a box beneath one of the shelves. I didn't let on that I had seen him. Instead, I pretended to keep walking, but at the last second, I turned and went the other way. He was only about 30 feet away from me, and my gut told me I needed to get out of there. Just as I started to leave, I heard noises behind me, footsteps. Even with my headphones in, I could hear them. That was enough for me. I took off running toward the exit leading back to the sales floor. The footsteps behind me grew louder as he followed. I burst through the door onto the main floor, and when I looked back, the man hadn't come out after me. Heart pounding, I ran to find the nearest employee. I spotted Al, who was working overnight in electronics, and told him what had just happened. Concerned but skeptical, he agreed to come check it out with me. I had a terrible feeling about the whole situation, and I couldn't help but wonder if the guy was dangerous. When we went back to the storage area, we immediately heard the sound of another door opening. It was coming from one of the emergency exit doors that led outside. Those doors were rarely used, and yet we walked in just in time to see the man slipping through it. The door swung shut behind him, and just like that, he was gone. To this day, I have no idea how he got inside. My only guess is that he somehow managed to hide in the store while we were open and stayed hidden until after closing. But the scariest part? I have no idea what he was planning to do when he followed me through the storage area. Not long after that, I quit the job.